Welcome to In the Name of the Law with your host, Liisa Speaker from Speaker Law Firm. Joining her today is Stephen Sinas from Sinas Dramis Law Firm, Kent Wood of Wood & Associates, PLLC, along with Mary Chartier and Chartier Nyamfukudza from Chartier Nyamfukudza, PLC. Now let's discuss some remarkable stories and real cases.
Welcome to In the Name of the Law, a legal talk show about real people with real problems. Today we're going to talk about the R. Kelly criminal case, the Revocation of Paternity Act, and the 70th anniversary of the Sinas Dramis Law Firm. Stay tuned.
In the name of family law.
I'm here with Kent Wood, the owner and lead attorney at Wood & Associates in Lansing, Michigan, and today we're going to talk about the Revocation of Paternity Act. This is an act that was created in 2012, and it is so complicated. So Kent today is going to help us understand what the act is all about. Welcome, Kent.
Well, thank you. Yeah, the Revocation of Paternity Act, also, well, I guess in our circles it's called ROPA for short, is this idea that if there's a child born of a relationship and there's any dispute over who the actual father is, prior to 2012, that person was kind of stuck in terms of being able to claim their parental rights. But now, since 2012, they can do so as long as they do so prior to the child turning 3 years old.
So let's talk about the different types of fathers that the act identifies.
Right. So one of the types of fathers is the legal father, the presumed father. If a child is born during a marriage, it is presumed that the parents are the biological parents of that child.
The husband is the
father of that
right. The
child.
wife is obviously the mother, right?
Yes, and also if a legal father can be established if they're not married, but someone signs an affidavit of parentage. So they're presumed to be the father. And then there's also what I call the alleged father. That's the person who may actually be the biological father. They're not in the relationship. They're not on the affidavit of parentage.
They're not a legal parent, right, but they are actually the bio DNA of
right,
that
right.
father of that child.
Yes.
Right.
And so they each have different routes they can take. The mom can take a route. The legal father can take a route, and the alleged father can all take different routes to challenge the paternity and establish, usually with the DNA evidence, who the biological parents actually are.
And a lot of times it's to revoke the parental rights of the husband, who is not the biological father, but is the legal father.
Right. The most common situation is usually there's parties that are married, but they've separated, but they haven't divorced. Mm-hmm. And one of them gets in a new relationship. The wife gets in a new relationship, becomes pregnant. The law says that her husband, who she's married to, is the legal father.
Right, right. Well, let's talk about some of the cases you've worked on. So for one example you were mentioning to me earlier was the in this exact context where the mother was trying to revoke her husband as the father in
yes.
favor of who she thought was the alleged father, right?
Yes, we've done a few of these. So they were separated. She had started a new relationship, and she believed her new boyfriend was the father. And so she initiated and brought everybody into court, and they had to testify, and they all submitted to DNA testing. So her husband, the boyfriend, and the child all submitted to DNA testing. And it was determined that her husband was not the father. But unfortunately, it was also determined that her new boyfriend was not the father.
Oh boy.
Yeah, I felt like I was in a Jerry Springer episode right there in the courtroom going, oh no, what can we do? Now, we knew before we went into the court, but we had to go address it.
And what happens in that case, is the judge going to have to deny the revocation unless she wants to make this other third person, maybe she even knows who he is at this point. I don't know.
Right. The judge, there needs to be a parent there for legal purpose and statutory purposes. So we actually finally found the actual father, and we established and completed the action about 8 months later.
So what I've seen a lot of, and I think you have too, is where they're the husband and wife, the husband's not the father, but somebody wants to revoke the husband, but what's the key for like the alleged father, the guy who probably is the DNA? Okay. What does he have to show the court in order to revoke the husband's paternity?
Interestingly enough, he has to obviously show that the child has to be under 3 years old. We've said that, but he also has to prove that he did not know that the woman was married at the time they engaged in the sexual act. At the time the child was conceived. Mm-hmm. If it can be proven that he knew, that is a barrier to him, or at least a defense barrier that the husband can say, hey, look, you knew he was married. And I've actually had this case where parties were unfaithful to each other and became pregnant, and the alleged father showed up and said, that's my father. But the husband had formed a bond with this 8-month-old child, and we were able to prove that the boyfriend or affair individual, the alleged father, knew mom was married at that time.
And that's
so
the
that
end of
stopped
it.
the judge. The judge just stopped it there and ordered everything to stay the same.
So, and I saw a case once where the alleged father knew that she was married, but then he was, I guess, under the impression that she did get divorced, and that was enough. But it was very fact intense.
Yes, that's exactly.
The other thing for alleged fathers is, in order to establish revoking the husband, is that the husband, the alleged father, and the mother all have to mutually and openly acknowledge that this other guy is actually the father.
Yes.
That's a tricky thing to
That
prove
can
as well.
be tricky.
Very tricky.
Yeah, we've used a lot of social media to help make that work.
Mm-hmm.
But there is another issue that's kind of come up, and a very unique issue in our office going on right now, so I can't get into too many details, but the Revocation of Paternity Act says paternity right in it, so it's designed about fathers. Mm-hmm. But we have a situation because of the change in law, same-sex marriage, 2 women married, they're going through a divorce. One became pregnant without the knowledge of the other. Mm-hmm. And now it's a question of how do we determine paternity? Mm-hmm. The law would say, and says, because it's supposed to be gender neutral, says that the other spouse, the non-pregnant spouse, right, the mom, is the presumed legal parent, the legal father, mm-hmm. because they were married at the time. Mm-hmm. But everybody would know genetically that's not possible. Right. So the question is, does ROPA, does the Revocation of Paternity Act, apply to this situation?
So even though the act says paternity, it says alleged father, presumed father, there's all these terms that refer to man. Can that be challenged in court? I think it could be. And for maybe a couple different reasons, because what if you had 2 men that were married to each other? Both of them would be fathers. So the same-sex marriage with 2 men would be able to use ROPA, but the same-sex marriage with women would not be able to use ROPA, which is I
guess it's not gender neutral,
right?
Like
right.
It's a constitutional issue. Should women in a 2-woman marriage be able to use ROPA to assert parental rights or to withdraw or withhold parental rights, in essence, if one of them wanted to do so?
Right, it'd be an equal protection challenge. Sorry, slipped my mind for a second.
Right. Yeah, no, it's a kind of a first impression. We've never had it. It was like, when we found out the facts and what was going on, we were like, holy moly.
But I think that point is well taken, because after the United States Supreme Court decided the Obergefell decision, which legalized basically same-sex marriage, all these states have statutes with language that's been around for a long time. And in this case, ROPA has only been around since 2012. But in any event, it was pre-Obergefell and the legalization of same-sex marriage. All those statutes, they haven't caught up with changing the language to be gender neutral.
No, they haven't. We're actually going to try to just plead with the court to allow us to kind of use ROPA as to push the issue and see if there's going to be any dispute on that matter.
So this is great, any other words of caution or wisdom that you can share with somebody who might be considering a ROPA action?
A ROPA challenge, the 3-year deadline is serious. We had a child situation where the child was 4, mm-hmm. and they denied the alleged father a chance to challenge it because of the age of the child. So do not wait.
Right. Well, thank you, Kent. We really appreciate it.
Right. Thank you.
In the Name of Family Law is brought to you by Wood & Associates, PLLC. In the Name of Personal Injury Law.
I'm here with Steve Sinas, a personal injury attorney at the Sinas Dramis Law Firm. Now, normally, we'd be talking with Steve about personal injury law and how to protect your family, but today we're doing a special segment on the Sinas Dramis Law Firm's 70th anniversary as a law firm. Welcome back, Steve.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, 70 years is a really long time. That is 7 decades.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I know you're not that old.
Yeah, I'm not. The firm way exceeds me, but it's certainly, we feel it's something to celebrate in terms of a business being able to stay together that long. And I like to think it's an interesting story.
So how did the firm begin?
Yeah, so my grandfather, Thomas G. Sinas, and his best friend, Lee Dramis, got out of law school, were thinking about what they wanted to make themselves as lawyers, and they decided to open the Sinas Dramis law firm. And they started just the two of them, and they quickly gained a lot of respect in the legal community, and others joined them. And so they increased the partnership and ended up having a lot of success in the courtroom. They both were great stewards of their community. My grandfather was a Lansing City Council member. Lee Dramis taught law at Cooley Law School. So they had their success. They were recognized figures, and they really just took the firm to great success in those first couple of years.
Well, and stalwarts of the community as well, right?
Yeah.
But you told, I know an interesting story about your grandfather.
Yes.
Involving a lawsuit where he was the plaintiff. Can you tell us about that?
So I have Greek heritage, and my grandfather was Greek, and as a Greek immigrant, he loved the restaurant scene that was downtown Lansing. There was a really great culture of Greek and Italian restaurants, and over time, the city of Lansing started selling its land to the state of Michigan and to Lansing Community College. And my grandfather didn't like what it was doing to the culture of downtown Lansing. So he filed a lawsuit, which is known as Thomas G. Sinas versus the city of Lansing.
So what year was this? Do you
this
remember?
was in this, I think, 1960 or so,
Okay.
late 50s. Okay. And so he filed this lawsuit, and it was challenged on the grounds of whether he had standing as a taxpayer to sue the city. But what his argument was that by selling off the land, it was really eroding the culture of downtown Lansing, and they should stop doing it. And he ultimately lost at the Supreme Court. There's a Supreme Court decision saying he didn't have standing as the law requires it, and so they just dismissed his case on a technical ground. But I think a lot of people around the Lansing area can see what he was saying.
Well, it's really actually timely today because after COVID-19, everybody was sent home to work remotely last year. A lot of those state workers aren't coming back to downtown Lansing. And how is that affecting the businesses and the culture in downtown Lansing when we've lost like thousands of workers who are no longer coming there on a daily basis?
Absolutely. We're already trying to make the downtown better before the pandemic, but the pandemic has really created many more challenges for businesses to succeed down there.
Right. So eventually your father, George Sinas, joined the firm. When did that happen?
He graduated from law school in 1975, and he saw an opportunity at the firm that he thought was better than any other opportunity he had out there. And so he went ahead and became a lawyer at the firm. Around that same time, the Michigan auto no-fault insurance law was passed. And Lee Dramis, who handled personal injury cases, told him that you need to know that law inside and out, and the firm needs to be leaders in this area of law because it's going to be a big deal. And he was very prescient in that regard. And,
yeah, I guess so.
And so George sat down in the basement, I heard, and just studied the law inside and out as it was being decided by the courts. And soon enough, he had a partner by the name of Tim Donovan come join him. And they really took the firm to this level of expertise in the no-fault law. And that's one of the reasons, or is the reason why we have this foundation within the no-fault law.
So Steve, when did you join the firm and why?
I joined the firm in 2007 after I graduated from law school and passed the bar. And I had actually been clerking in downtown Detroit at a personal injury law firm. I worked for a guy named Brian McKenna and Barry Waldman. And at the time, I was obviously well aware of what was going on at the Sinas Dramis law firm. And really, George and Tim had gained some other partners, such as Mike Larkin, Jim Graves, Brian Waldman, all phenomenal lawyers. And I knew that the firm was a really great place overall, and that it had great morals, that had great standards of excellence, and it served its clients really well. And so as I was trying to figure out my future, my wife had an opportunity to work in Lansing as well, and just things fell into place. And I just said, this is the place for me. And interestingly enough, Brian Waldman, one of the partners at the firm, is the son of Barry Waldman down in Detroit. And so there was already this connection there too. And it's really been one of the best decisions of my life.
But it's become even more of a family affair, hasn't it?
That's right. I was very happy in 2013 when my older brother, who was a very successful lawyer in Minneapolis, chose to move back with his family. to Michigan, and they really wanted to live in the Grand Rapids area, and the firm had an interest in having an office out there. So my brother, Thomas G. Sinas, who's named after my grandfather, started our law firm out in Grand Rapids. And so he's been leading that ever since.
So what I think of the Sinas Dramis law firm, of course, other than the no-fault law that you've worked on for such a long time, is how the firm has been so dedicated to serving the community and educating the public. Can you talk a little bit about how, your mission as a firm has been to do these things, and what kind of things have you been doing?
The one thing I've learned from all the great mentors and lawyers around me is that it's a privilege to be a lawyer. It's a privilege to serve your clients and make a living off of doing so. And so we look at it as an obligation for us to serve our community, to help people understand the law, to promote public education about the law, and to get involved with community events. And one thing we've been doing for a number of years is giving away bike helmets every spring to thousands of kids, at least 1,000 or so each year. And so we do things like that because we believe it's incumbent upon us as a business in this community to connect with our community and serve our community.
And like the People's Law School is another example.
Yes, that's another example. We've been doing that also for 20 years. That's just a program we put together, and people are able to learn about the law from practicing attorneys.
So regular folks can come to a day-long session, yes, and learn about the law and how it affects their lives?
Yes, we've had to change the format and how we're doing it because of COVID recently.
Right.
We're going to still do it, and it's just an example of how we want to really make sure that people have the best shot of understanding the law.
So the need for your firm to educate the public has become even more pronounced recently because we have a new no-fault law that has really changed the entire landscape. Can you tell us about what your firm is doing on that front?
Yeah, so in 2019, the legislature greatly overhauled the no-fault insurance law. We've still been greatly involved in that area of law, serving lots of catastrophically injured people, and people have a lot of questions about what the legislature has done. And it's very confusing the way they wrote the law. It's complicated, it's ambiguous. And really the law affects so many people's lives. So we felt it incumbent upon us to take the time to study the law, understand as much as we can, and get out there in the public to answer as many questions of catastrophic injured people and their families.
What I know, Steve, your firm has also taken the time to educate insurance adjusters and insurance agents to make sure they understood the law as well.
Right. We educate anybody who wants to be educated and try to help them understand this area of law, no matter who they are.
And for our viewers, we've done several episodes about the new law and helping the public understand what happened and how it affects them. So if you're at all confused about no-fault law, there's definitely opportunities to go back and watch some of our prior episodes that we've had recently that cover in some pretty good detail some guidance for the viewers, right?
Definitely. So we've been doing that here at the show. We try to do that in many different ways. And I'll just say, to kind of wrap it up here, that our business just thanks the community for believing in us, and all our clients we've had over the years. We hope that they're happy with their work that we've done for them. And when it comes down to our future, we hope it's as bright as our past.
Well, Steve, thank you, and congratulations again to your firm's 70th anniversary. What an achievement!
Thank you very much.
In the Name of Personal Injury Law is brought to you by the Sinas Dramis Law Firm. Go to WLAJ.com for more information on today's topics and to view other In the Name of the Law episodes. In the Name of Criminal Defense.
Following a federal trial in New York that lasted 7 weeks, the Grammy Award-winning artist R. Kelly was convicted of sexual exploitation of a child, bribery, racketeering, and sex trafficking involving 5 victims. Here to talk about the case are experienced criminal defense attorneys Mary Chartier and Chartier Nyamfukudza of the law firm Chartier Nyamfukudza. Welcome.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you. For those who have not followed the trial, tell us about the verdicts.
Certainly. In this case, R. Kelly was charged with 8 counts of sex trafficking as well as racketeering. We typically see a racketeering charge when the government is trying to take down a mafia boss. So drugs and guns are the typical charges. But here, the allegation was that R. Kelly ran a criminal enterprise that crossed state lines for the specific purpose of luring victims for sex crimes. There were 14 various alleged acts attached to the racketeering charge. And ultimately, the jury found that the government met its burden on 12 of the 14 acts. There was a woman named Sonia who accused R. Kelly of kidnapping and sexually assaulting her, but the jury returned not guilty verdicts on those two claims.
So was this Kelly's first brush with the law?
No, unfortunately for him. I think it was about 2008, he was tried on multiple counts of child pornography, producing child pornography in Illinois. He was found not guilty on that. Primarily, it appears because the complainant refused to cooperate with the prosecutor. She didn't want to testify, and the jury just didn't have enough to convict.
So what was different this time around?
The most important difference in this trial was that several complainants took the stand and testified at great length. Again, it lasted 7 weeks. The government called a total of 45 witnesses, and the first report surfaced in Chicago back in 2000. Since then, we've seen a docuseries called Surviving R. Kelly. Then the reporter who first reported on R. Kelly back in 2000 wrote a book entitled Soulless: The Case Against R. Kelly. Other celebrities and powerful men have been convicted following similar allegations. And finally, it's impossible to ignore the societal shift in attitudes and the impact of the Me Too movement.
So do we know what the defense argued in R. Kelly's case?
Defenses in these types of cases are somewhat limited. They went after, in this case, the complainants, and essentially they accused them of not being truthful, of lying, and essentially being gold diggers, which is not R. Kelly's song, but that was their theme for it in a way, because they had been women who had been involved with a very famous and to some degree wealthy man. It is tough in cases when there are sexual assault allegations, when you have multiple complainants and multiple women coming forward and making that claim, because juries tend to say, well, they might not believe one, as Takura said, they didn't believe one woman, but you have multiple women making the same claim, so there must be some truth there. I think the defense had an incredibly challenging job in this case, and and you see that in the result with the verdict.
What can you tell us about the jury?
Well, it was comprised of seven men and 5 women. Those men and women deliberated for 9 hours before they returned the verdicts. And again, what the verdicts suggest to me is that they actually paid attention, because we often have cases where it's a clean sweep for either side. But here they were able to parse out, again, that woman who was named Sonia, for whatever reasons, we don't know. There are no cameras inside federal courtrooms, but those verdicts suggest to me that they paid a great deal of attention.
So what type of sentence is he facing?
Oh, he's facing a minimum of 10 years to life. I mean, I'm sure he wishes he could fly now, right? I mean, that's his song. He is facing a long time in prison. And his defense is going to have a really tough time at sentencing too, because it's really tough after a jury conviction to position your sentence or position your client at sentencing. He can't, because he's going to want to appeal the verdict. So he's not going to be able to come in and express remorse for his conduct, which someone frequently does when they plead guilty, because he's going to appeal. So he's not going to admit that he did anything wrong, even if he did do something wrong. And they've got to position him in a way where a judge will be sympathetic to him. It's my understanding he had a very difficult childhood, a lot of abuse there. You're likely to see the defense bring that up. He's got mental health issues that have gone untreated. You're likely to see the defense bring that up. But a federal judge, federal sentences are so much longer than state court sentences. A state court drug sentence, maybe someone, if they get 6 months in jail, they might be looking at 10 years in federal court. He's looking at a significant period of time. And I think this judge will probably want to send a message, which they can do. They can look at that messaging. They have to look at him as an individual, but they can also look at broader society and will want to send a message that this conduct that he was convicted of is not okay.
So we've been talking about the R. Kelly New York trial, but isn't there also charges currently pending against him in Chicago?
That's right. He's got a federal trial that's going to come up in Chicago, Illinois, but that's not the end of the legal saga for him. Following that one, I don't know which one will come next, but he's also got a Cook County state case. And then finally, he rounds up his trip by being tried in state court in Minnesota.
And can all these different courts stack the sentences on top of each other?
Oh, absolutely. We saw that with Larry Nassar, right? And again, we don't know whether some of the other jurisdictions will choose not to go forward, but there's a very real possibility that he could draw his last breath behind bars.
So what does the result here mean for the Me Too movement?
This is, I think, for the Me Too movement, probably, seen as a victory. You have Black women who have historically not seen a lot of success in court. You haven't seen, police and prosecutors take them seriously. And now you see that, and you see a conviction of R. Kelly, very famous, very powerful person. There is so much tension, though, between a lot of what the Me Too movement espouses, which is good in society, which is when someone makes a claim, you believe them, and what actually goes on in a courtroom, which is not when someone makes a claim, a jury automatically believes them. I mean, the entire court process is about an adversarial process. It's about the truth-seeking process.
Yeah.
Right. It's the truth-seeking process for the prosecutor, but not for the defense, right? The defense is not there to figure out what really happened. The defense is there to poke holes in the prosecutor's case and try and show reasonable doubt. And you've got this real tension between what might be very good for society, but it is not what happens in a courtroom, because that's not what a courtroom is about. I can't just come in and say, Liisa Speaker punched me in the nose and have 12 jurors believe me.
Has the response to the verdict been uniform?
No, it hasn't. Many of his fans on the day of the verdict, as they stood outside, blasted the music, and his music is still available on many of the most visited streaming services. And it's been reported that he's logged millions of sales since the verdict was announced.
And do verdicts like R. Kelly's make it more difficult for you to defend your clients?
They do and they don't. Anytime that there's a big public trial, people pay attention to it, and that gives them a little insight into the courtroom process. But it's never been easy for criminal defense attorneys. There has never been a time where people like us, they like what we do. I mean, in general, we're usually extremely disliked. That's just a facet of our job. It's, that hasn't changed in many decades, and it's not likely to change. People really don't like us until they need us, right? They love us when we exonerate people who've been wrongfully convicted, and then the next day they go back to disliking us because of the clients who we represent. So I don't think this makes it any more challenging for us, but we love what we do and we're really passionate about it. And we talk about cases and with lawyers and exonerations on our podcast, Constitutional Defenders, and I encourage everybody to check us out.
In the Name of Criminal Defense is brought to you by Chartier Nyamfukudza, PLC.
Thank you for joining us for In the Name of the Law. We look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you for joining us today for In the Name of the Law. Please go to WLAJ.com for more information on today's topics, and please join us next week for another informative show.